Hi, Misha here, and we're going to look at a distinctly British helicopter, the Westland Lynx. And I actually have two models to show you. I've got the Army AH.1 in kind of anti-armor configuration from the first Gulf War. And I've got the Navy HAS.3, which is a upgraded version from the Navy, circa 2002, give or take. This is more of a general utility search and rescue naval-based version. And both models are 1/72 scale die cast from Corgi. Yeah, I like doing helicopter videos, I really do, but there aren't many die-cast models. Corgi does a great job of doing the British helicopters, but not much else. Some of the Americans are done by Air Force One, but yeah, there's just not a lot going on for the helicopter, unfortunately. Anyway, the Lynx started off in the late 1960s. It was designed kind of as a utility helicopter to replace the HU or UH-1 Huey in British service. It was just kind of a transport helicopter, but the Army and the Navy expressed interest, as did the French military. So Westland kind of more militarized it and specialized it. And the prototype first flew in 1971. And the British Army placed its initial order in 1977. These would go into full production in 1978. And the first Army choppers would be delivered in 1979. As for the Navy, they would get their first Lynx around 1981. It was known as the HAS.2. And it was very similar to the Army version, except it had a folding tail and folding rotors. Also, it had a tricycle wheeled undercarriage, whereas the Army, as you saw over here, has traditional skids. That was just better for better use on board ships, that kind of thing. So the Navy had these. They would use them for search and rescue, anti-submarine, general patrol. They could be equipped with 2 sea skewer missiles, 2 depth charges, or torpedoes, and were a very good and versatile maritime aircraft. They were acquired just in time to see use in the Falklands War, 1982. None were lost in combat, but 3 were lost when their transports were struck and damaged or destroyed. They were primarily charged with escorting other British assets during that war. The Lynx is about 50 feet long, has 4 rotor blades with a diameter of about 42 feet. This was a very fast helicopter, also very acrobatic. In fact, it set many records in the 80s for that. It could get up just over 200 miles per hour. And was very configurable. The back has 2 doors, which they do open on these Corgis. They can carry 8 to 10 troops. They can also carry different weaponry in the back instead, or fuel for long range, or sensor or radio equipment. The bay is pretty adjustable, frankly. These have a typical crew of 2 up front, pilot and essentially observer or co-pilot or specialist, whatever. They often have a 3rd crew member operating whatever is going on in the back as well. The HAS.3, like this here, was introduced in the 80s as an upgraded version. It had more powerful engines, a new transmission, new flotation system, just, general tweaks to the design. And would serve aboard Royal Navy vessels. The Lynx was used by the Royal Navy during the 1991 Gulf War, the first Iraq War, Operation Desert Storm. In fact, these took place in the largest naval engagement of that war, where they went up against the Iraqi Navy. Out of 25 missiles fired, 18 hit their targets and did damage or sunk the Navy. So they did a significant chunk of walloping Saddam's naval forces in 1991. As for the Army version, not to be forgotten, the original AH.1 here, which this is one specifically from the Iraq War, could be outfitted with up to 8 tow missiles. It could have rocket pods instead if you wanted to. It could also have additional machine guns. Like I said, it had the skids, the early versions. Later Army versions would go to the wheeled undercarriage instead. The blades are a little different just because they have different needs. But yeah, these would be used in effectively what Americans would call tank plinking. They would be sent up against tanks, armor, APCs, ground targets, and proved very effective in the Gulf War using their tow missiles. Afterwards, they would also be used in Kosovo in 1999. They escorted Chinooks, as well as transporting personnel or supplies. Again, for their size, they have a decent cargo capability. The AH.1 would be replaced by the AH.7 and AH.9, and finally the AH.9A. All just upgraded and improved versions, better engines, more versatility with the weaponry, new things like a glass cockpit. These would be deployed quite heavily during the Second Iraq War, 2003. In fact, they made up the bulk of the British rotor-bladed force. And they continued to see use throughout that war. The first was shot down in 2006 It was the first time a Lynx was shot down by an enemy, and only the second British aircraft lost in Iraq during that war. But despite this, it has a very good track record, and these often operated alongside the smaller Gazelle, which I have a video on, or maybe we'll have a video on, depending on when I put this one out. But yeah, the Royal Navy would retire their Lynxes in 2015. And the Royal Army just retired theirs last year in 2018. Westland, now Augusta Westland, produced approximately 450 of these. Many went to the British, many went to other customers, including France, and kind of the whole deal there with France tied into things like the Puma and the Gazelle, and there was a lot of cooperation there with the helicopters. Pretty neat. And a distinctly British chopper. It's, not as small in combat as, say, a Apache. Actually, it's small, but you know what I mean. It's still a jack of all trades type helicopter, but a little more combat-like than some of the earlier ones. And unlike many other Westland designs, which were copies or variants based on American choppers, this is distinctly British and was a very successful, respected design. So yeah. Now these models again are both from Corgi and I think are super neat. I originally picked this one up, the Navy version, from Pete's Collectibles a while back. He had a sale going on, and I liked it a lot. I thought it was a neat chopper. And knowing that there was a good deal of difference between a 2002 Navy and 1991 Army, I picked this Army version up from Aiken's Airplanes recently. We had a small little incident when we did it. I went to open the box, and much to my surprise, instead of this chopper in the box, it was a World War I German Fokker DR-7 biplane. So, yeah, not at all, early 90s British helicopter. But anyway, I told them about the mix-up, and they were great. They sent this plane, this chopper, out very quickly, along with the return label for the missent plane. And I'm glad they did, because this was actually the last one they had of this variation in stock. They have a few other AH.1s maybe, but I wanted the Iraq War one, complete with the missiles, kind of a more armed up version, because the Navy over there is more of a utility search and rescue configuration. So I wanted one with some teeth to it, and to represent that first conflict. So I'm very happy to have it. The construction of these is your typical Corgi. It's got a lot of metal. The fuselage is metal. Your tail is, of course, let's see, bottom's metal. The horizontal is polymer. Of course, the blades are polymer. Your little doors are polymer, but they do open. The little details, but actually, surprisingly and quite nicely, the skids are metal, which means they shouldn't droop or splay over time if you want to display it on the skids. And of course you have crew figures, which Corgi's really good about. So yeah. And they're about the only ones, maybe the only ones, who do a die-cast Lynx. So if you're into British choppers, check it out, either at Pete's Collectibles, which you can use product code Misha, M-I-S-H-A, through the summer of this year. Or, for different versions, check out Aiken's and see what they have left in stock. I will say their prices are a little higher, but they have more selection and more of the rare ones. Well, if you have any questions or comments, please do post them below. Otherwise, I greatly appreciate you tuning in, and I will catch you very soon next time.